Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, all eyes are on Jacob Zuma as the former South African president fails to turn himself in before an arrest deadline. Meanwhile, prosecutors up the ante in trying to extradite the Gupta brothers who were enmeshed in Zuma's scandal-prone leadership. Also, in the latest of a wave of mass abductions from schools in northwestern Nigeria, about 150 students are taken from boarding school in Kaduna State. Parents at the Bethel Baptist High School are distraught. And we hear from a Tunisian artist who's drawn to social commentary, as an exhibition is held in Paris highlighting African cartoonists and political illustrators. Nadia Chiari turns to her work to outline her post-revolutionary disappointment. Now, the fate of former South African President Jacob Zuma is still up in the air. A 5-day deadline he was given to hand himself over to police ended on Sunday. He was sentenced to 15 months in jail last week for contempt of court. He was still a no-show on Monday. Zuma applied to halt the arrest order last Friday, and he still commands a lot of support in the grassroots of the ruling ANC, despite being forced out in 2018 over corruption scandals. Meanwhile, Interpol has issued red notices for the arrest of the Gupta brothers. The businessman was central to some of the graft accusations against Zuma. Sam Bradpeace tells us more.
So on Friday, Jacob Zuma lodged this legal challenge against the 15-month sentence, which was handed to him by the Constitutional Court. He argued that he was too old and also that he was too ill to go to jail. He said this would essentially be a death sentence. And then over the weekend, he continued to make public attacks on the court, arguing that he was the victim, really, of a political witch hunt, arguing also that essentially this was a slide back into apartheid-type rule. So he, really quite emotive attacks there that he's been launching on the South African judiciary, all really with the aim, it has to be said, or what looks like the aim of stirring up public opposition to the courts and in favour of himself, something that appears to be working in some sections of South African society, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, where he's currently holed up in his rural home. In terms of what this all means, well, there will be 2 hearings, really, to examine Mr. Zuma's challenge against the sentence on July the 6th, that's Tuesday, and also on July the 12th. And it looks extremely unlikely that Mr. Zuma would be arrested before, I would say, the last hearing on July the 12th, where he will actually make an appearance in front of the Constitutional Court to plead his case for that sentence really to be overturned.
Now, South African prosecutors have also stepped up their bid to extradite the Gupta brothers. Now, they're also embroiled in the investigations into the embezzlement of state funds under Zuma. They fled the country in 2018. So does this red notice that we're hearing about make it any more likely that they'll end up in court?
Yeah, it certainly seems like the net is closing on the Gupta brothers. Just last month, the UAE actually ratified an extradition treaty with South Africa, which would facilitate their return to South Africa to face justice for many accusations of corruption, actually intrinsically tied to the Zuma administration. So not only last month we had that extradition treaty signed, now, as you mentioned, there's the Interpol red notice as well, which only adds further pressure. But it's not just this kind of judicial and law enforcement pressure that they're under. There are also financial considerations. Back in 2019, the US imposed sanctions on the Gupta brothers. The UK government is looking at doing the same thing. So it really looks like just a matter of time until at least 2 of them, two of those most implicated really in this corruption, alleged corruption, I should say, linked to Jacob Zuma, will be returning to South Africa.
Sam Bradpeace there for us. Now, about 150 Nigerian students are missing after they were abducted by an armed gang in Kaduna State overnight into Monday. Groups of kidnappers have been ramping up attacks on schools in northwestern Nigeria since December. And since then, more than 1,000 people have gone missing, leaving devastated communities behind. Nicolas Chemin has more.
Once again, images of distraught Nigerian parents on school premises. This is the 10th mass school kidnapping since December in the northwest of the country. This time, the Bethel Baptist High School in the south of Kaduna State was targeted. 25 students escaped, but around 140 were taken away by gunmen.
Just this morning, at about 6, I received a phone call that they have entered the school, kidnappers, and all our children are packed, including my daughter inside. We rushed down here. We confirmed that they are all packed.
A few hours earlier, in the same state of Kaduna, a hospital was attacked and 8 people were kidnapped, including a 1-year-old child.
On the gunshot, they entered some of the houses in the quarters and picked some people. Like my sister here, they picked her with her 2 children, with her senior sister and the daughter, 5 of them.
But recently, it's mostly schools that have been targeted. Around 1,000 students have been abducted in Nigeria since December. Most have been released after negotiations with local officials. But the government says it strongly opposes the paying of ransoms. School kidnappings were first carried out by jihadist groups, like the one in Chibok in 2014 when nearly 300 girls were taken. But the tactic has now been adopted by criminal gangs.
Well, despite rebel gains in the Ethiopian region of Tigray, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed claims that the army is in good shape. After 8 months of conflict, the Tigrayan capital of Mekele fell to local TDF forces last week. They see it as a military victory, although Abiy claims that federal forces strategically pulled back to offer a ceasefire. Tigrayan leaders say that they'll only accept that if Eritrean forces backing the government withdraw, and they're also calling for Abiy and Eritrea's president to be held accountable for the brutality and humanitarian crises caused by the fighting. Abiy's accused the TPLF of wanting to drag out the conflict.
When we look at the current situation in Tigray, I see that there aren't many who have the desire to see the conflict stop. There are those who want us to live in conflict and see a destroyed Ethiopia and a destroyed Tigray. Also, there are those who want to see a destroyed Oromia and a destroyed Amhara. That is our observation. We have seen dangerous experiences.
Well, thousands of people have been killed in the conflict, and the UN says that hundreds of thousands are facing famine in Tigray. Our team tells us more.
2 months ago, this man lost everything. At the heart of Tigray's mountains, Eritrean soldiers massacred residents in his village. These graves, built in the hollow of a cliff, are the only visible trace of the killing.
My wife was called Hawa. She was a mother of 5. 1 month ago, she gave birth to a baby. We also had daughters. Their names were Tesla, Zuvan, and Rael. We were not able to pray for them because we had to run for our lives.
19 people were killed in 1 day.
On that day, there were many Eritrean soldiers. They were uncountable. As they were passing through this area, people were simply staying in their homes. The soldiers brought all the residents together and then killed them all here.
Many witnesses accuse Eritreans of having massacred and raped civilians throughout the region. People here have been in dire need of medical assistance ever since the local clinic was attacked.
This center was treating patients until mid-January, but then the Ethiopian military destroyed it.
In these rural areas, accessing medical treatment has become extremely difficult. Even food is now difficult to find. Children especially are suffering from malnutrition.
We're going to weigh her. We found this baby by chance. If we'd come later, we could have easily missed her. There are many babies just like her, and their mothers don't have milk. These children are too underweight, and what we give them won't be enough to save them.
To help those most in need, some organizations, sometimes supported by the government, are trying to distribute wheat and seeds.
We have planned to distribute about 2,900 quintal of seeds. We are in distributed to the most vulnerable people, but it is not covers to the whole our people.
The unilateral ceasefire declared by the government on June 28th could come as a relief amid an alarming humanitarian situation. According to the UN, 350,000 people are facing famine in Tigray.
Well, finally, a new exhibition, Cartooning for Peace in Africa, is being held here in Paris until the 11th. It's a celebration of freedom of expression and turns the spotlight onto the African cartoonists and illustrators holding power to account. Our correspondents met one artist from Tunis whose work outlines her disappointment with the decade that's followed her country's revolution.
A few pen strokes and a steady hand are enough to draw Willis from Tunis, a daring cat who showed up after the 2011 revolution.
I used this character to bear witness to what I felt in 2011, but afterwards he turned into a loudspeaker to denounce all injustices and arbitrary arrests, attacks against freedoms, attacks on academics and artists.
In the peace and quiet of her craft store in the northern suburbs of Tunis, Nadia Khiari tells us she's struggling to find inspiration 10 years after the revolution.
The main challenge today is that political news is so cartoonish already that I find it hard to do satire.
Despite her disappointments, the cartoonist has compiled 10 years of drawings and commentary on Tunisian news in a book.
I tried to put the drawings as a sort of chain of history to understand why we are here today.
It's a way of taking a step back to express a feeling about the revolution's achievements.
This is the difference before and after. It's truly how I feel. Well, we can scream our pain today. It doesn't change much, but we can speak up. That's it.
But perhaps there's some hope in passing along the craft. Nadia is a plastic arts teacher at a French high school. Teaching remains her means of defending, at all costs, an achievement of the revolution, freedom of expression.
In my classes, the freedom of expression of students is unlimited. They have the right to talk about anything, to question anything.
The illustrator will be among the artists honored in the exhibition on News Illustrators Cartooning for Peace in Paris in early July.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.